Trump says talks are going beautifully. Iran says there are no talks. Trump extended the deadline, then extended it again. 1 million Iranians just volunteered to fight. The most powerful military on earth is negotiating with a country it already defeated, while quietly shipping 10,000 more troops to the region. This is the art of the deal, undefeated. Donald Trump says talks with Tehran are going very well. Iran says there are no talks. And somewhere between those two positions, thousands of American troops are quietly moving towards the Gulf. The timeline tells its own story. On March 23rd, Trump halted threatened strikes on Iranian power plants for 5 days. On March 26th, he extended that pause to 10 days, pushing the deadline to April 6th. The reason he gave: negotiations are ongoing and progressing.
As per Iranian government request, please let this statement serve to represent that I am pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by the fake news media and others, they are going very well.
Tehran's response was blunt. A senior Iranian official told Reuters the American proposal was one-sided and served only US and Israeli interests. Iran has not budged from its own demands: formal control of the Strait of Hormuz, the removal of all sanctions, compensation for war damages, and an end to fighting against Hezbollah. While Trump posts optimism, the Pentagon is weighing a deployment of up to 10,000 additional ground troops to the Middle East. That would come on top of roughly 5,000 Marines already ordered to the region and thousands of paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division en route. Analysts have pointed to Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal in the Persian Gulf, as a likely target of any ground operation.
There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
Iran is not waiting to find out, though. Tasnim news agency reported that over 1 million fighters have been mobilized, with recruitment centers run by the Basij, the IRGC, and the regular army overwhelmed by volunteers.
There has been a recent surge of requests from Iranian youth to Basij, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the army to participate in the battle.
Moreover, according to multiple sources familiar with US intelligence, Tehran has been reinforcing the Kharg Island in recent weeks, deploying additional troops, air defense systems, and preparing defensive traps in anticipation of a possible American operation. The war, now 4 weeks old, has already pushed crude oil prices up around 40%, with Brent crossing $105 a barrel on March 26th. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of global oil and liquefied natural gas passes, remains effectively blocked. Iranian officials told mediating countries Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey that having been caught off guard by Trump twice before, they do not want to be fooled again. Whether the pause is diplomacy or preparation, the troops keep moving, and the deadline keeps shifting. The United States is preparing a range of military options for a possible endgame in its conflict with Iran, from large-scale airstrikes to potential ground operations, as diplomacy shows signs of stalling. According to Axios, citing US officials and sources familiar with the discussions, the Pentagon is drafting plans for what has been described as a possible final blow.
The options are being examined as the chances of a sharp military escalation increase if US-Iran diplomacy fails to produce progress, especially if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed.
The options reportedly include seizing key Iranian positions such as Kharg Island and Larak Island, both critical to Tehran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Additional scenarios involve targeting Abu Musa and nearby islands, as well as intercepting Iranian oil shipments. More expansive plans include potential ground operations inside Iran to secure enriched uranium stockpiles, although large-scale airstrikes on nuclear facilities are also under consideration as a lower-risk alternative. Despite these preparations, officials acknowledge the risks of escalation.
Iran will also shape how the war ends, and that many of the scenarios under discussion could prolong and intensify the fighting rather than bring it to a swift conclusion.
According to the Axios report, before taking any of the more far-reaching steps, Trump could move first on a threat to bomb Iranian power plants and energy facilities. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Wednesday that
President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
the military buildup is already underway. Additional US forces, including Marine Expeditionary Units and elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, are being deployed to the region, signaling readiness for rapid escalation. Tehran has warned that such an attack would trigger major retaliation across the Gulf. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf appeared to reference the Abu Musa dispute with the United Arab Emirates, saying Iranian intelligence believes Iran's enemies are preparing an operation to occupy one of Iran's islands.
Based on some data, Iran's enemies, with the support of one of the regional countries, are preparing to occupy one of the Iranian islands. All enemy movements are under the full surveillance of our armed forces. If they step out of line, all the vital infrastructure of that regional country will, without restriction, become the target of relentless attacks.
At the political level, US President Donald Trump has intensified his rhetoric, claiming Iran is under severe pressure.
The Iranian negotiators are very different and strange. They are begging us to make a deal, which they should be doing since they have been militarily obliterated, with zero chance of a comeback, and yet they publicly state that they are only looking at our proposal. Wrong. They better get serious soon before it is too late, because once that happens, there is no turning back, and it won't be pretty.
Meanwhile, Iranian officials have warned that any attack on energy infrastructure would trigger a broader regional response, while also expressing deep distrust of Washington's diplomatic outreach. A high-stakes military scenario is unfolding in the Persian Gulf, as new intelligence suggests Iran is actively preparing for a potential US attempt to seize one of its most critical strategic assets. At the center of this tension is Kharg Island, a small but vital island that handles nearly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. According to multiple sources familiar with US intelligence, Tehran has been reinforcing the island in recent weeks, deploying additional troops, air defense systems, and preparing defensive traps in anticipation of a possible American operation. The Trump administration is reportedly weighing the option of using ground forces to take control of Kharg Island. The objective would be to pressure Iran into reopening the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for global oil shipments. But skepticism is already growing, with Gulf allies warning that any ground invasion could trigger widespread retaliation and attacks on critical infrastructure across the region. And at the same time, Iran's leadership has responded with explicit warnings.
Based on some intelligence reports, Iran's enemies are preparing to occupy one of the Iranian islands with support from one of the regional countries. Our forces are monitoring all enemy movements, and if they take any step, all the vital infrastructure of that regional country will be targeted with relentless, unceasing attacks.
The risks are substantial. Intelligence assessments indicate that Iran has fortified the island with layered defenses, including manpads, shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles, as well as anti-personnel and anti-armor mines positioned along likely landing zones. These preparations suggest Tehran is not only expecting an attack, but is actively shaping the battlefield to maximize potential US casualties.
I would be very worried about this. Iranians are clever and ruthless. They will do everything they can to inflict maximum casualties on US forces.
Despite US strikes hitting around 90 targets on March 13th, Kharg Island remains a highly dangerous objective due to its proximity to Iran's mainland, enabling rapid retaliation. A potential operation would require large amphibious forces, including Marine units and 82nd Airborne troops. According to Stavridis, the US military's strikes on the island degraded some of its air and sea defenses, which include Hawk surface-to-air missiles and Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns. A person familiar with US military planning told CNN that Kharg Island is roughly a third of the size of Manhattan, meaning the US would need to deploy a robust landing force to take the island if it moved ahead with such an operation. 2 Marine expeditionary units, which specialize in rapid response amphibious landings, raids, and assault missions from Navy amphibious ships, have recently deployed to the Middle East. Those units include several thousand Marines, along with amphibious warships, aviation assets, and landing craft. They are the most likely to be involved in an operation to take Kharg. Another person familiar with the US military planning said that Central Command has near constant and persistent overhead surveillance of the island, so the military has been able to see both physical and environmental changes in areas that appear to have been laid with traps. According to a source familiar with the administration's internal deliberations on the issue, US forces would still be vulnerable to Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks given the island's proximity to the Iranian coast, and Trump officials are still grappling with whether a ground mission is worth the risk. A source told CNN that the US retains plans to quickly destroy sensitive information and infrastructure if US installations and military posts abroad are overrun. The source added that Iran could have similar plans. This moment represents a critical turning point. What has so far been a conflict defined by airstrikes and proxy engagements may be edging towards a direct ground confrontation. And if US forces move on to Iranian territory, even on a small island, the consequences could extend far beyond Kharg, potentially igniting a broader regional war with global implications.